We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
This video is based on publicly available reports, verified news sources, and expert analysis. All statements reflect what has been reported, not confirmed conclusions. No individual is accused of any crime. The Guthrie family, including all siblings and spouses, has been officially cleared as possible suspects by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. That clearance stands and no agency has walked it back. It was not the ransom amount that changed everything. It was not even the content of the messages. It was where they were sent. On the morning investigators would later mark as a critical turning point in the Nancy Guthrie case, 2 new communications surfaced. They did not go to law enforcement. They did not go to the FBI tip line. They did not reach the family through a private channel designed to protect the integrity of a negotiation. They went to a media outlet. That single decision, routing communications through a third party, through a public-facing organization, through a channel that guarantees exposure, forced investigators to reassess something they had been quietly considering for days. Because people who are genuinely negotiating do not broadcast. And people who are genuinely trying to stay hidden do not invite attention. So the question changed. Not what do they want, but why are they doing this publicly? That question is the thread this video follows. Because the answer, when you pull it carefully, when you trace it back through everything the evidence has shown across 83 days, does not lead where the public conversation has been looking. It leads somewhere more specific. Somewhere the behavioral evidence, the physical evidence, and the forensic evidence have been pointing since the night of February 1st, 2026. And this week, for the first time in 83 days, 4 separate developments arrived simultaneously, each one pulling that thread from a different direction. Each one confirming what the structure of this investigation has been quietly building toward. This is what the evidence actually shows. Before getting into what this week produced, you have to understand the foundation. Not the theories. Not the speculation. The confirmed facts that have anchored this investigation from the beginning, and that no amount of noise, no amount of contradictory messaging, no amount of public distraction has been able to move. 2 timestamps. 1:47 a.m. 2:28 a.m. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, 2026, the Google Nest doorbell camera on the front of Nancy Guthrie's home on North Camino Escalante in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona disconnected. The FBI and Google spent days recovering footage from back-end servers because Nancy had no active cloud subscription. What they recovered showed a masked man in gloves and a dark jacket. He carried a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack sold exclusively at Walmart. He had a firearm holstered at his midsection. He held a flashlight in his mouth. And he covered the camera lens with foliage from a potted plant on Nancy's own porch. He was not rushing. He was not panicking. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker lost its Bluetooth connection to her phone. Not her heart. The device in her chest was still functioning. The connection between that device and the phone sitting on her nightstand dropped. And according to publicly available descriptions of how these systems work, that connection does not drop unless the person carrying the device has moved beyond the range of the paired phone. Distance. The specific, measurable, technologically documented reality of distance. Between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m., 41 minutes. That is the operational window. That is not rushed. That is not improvised. That is time. Time to move through a house. Time to manage a situation. Time to execute a plan that had been prepared over days and weeks before that morning. Those 2 timestamps have never changed. They do not depend on memory. They do not depend on anyone's account. They are logged, verified, permanent, and everything else, every theory, every ransom note, every public statement, every contradictory message, has to answer to them. The ransom communications. Most of the public conversation around this case has been structured around the ransom notes. Who sent them, what they said, whether they were real. For 83 days that framework dominated. And for 83 days it produced nothing. No verified proof of life. No completed transaction. No answer to any of the questions the notes themselves raised. This week, that framework collapsed. Publicly. Officially. On the record. According to publicly available reporting, a California man named Colella has been indicted by a federal grand jury. His trial is now set for June 23rd at the federal courthouse in Tucson. He is not being charged in connection with the notes sent to TMZ. He is being charged in connection with notes sent directly to members of the Guthrie family. According to the grand jury indictment, he sent 2 text messages to 2 family members on February 4th, 2026, asking, "Did you get the 12 Bitcoin? We're waiting on our end for the transaction." Investigators established he was acting as an impersonator, not a kidnapper, not someone with insider knowledge. A man who saw an opportunity in a family's grief and exploited it. That arrest matters for a reason that most coverage has not addressed directly enough. Savannah Guthrie said publicly, before her return to the Today Show on April 6, that she believed 2 of the ransom notes were legitimate. She drew a line between what was real and what was not. She said those 2 notes contained details that had never been made public, specific placements of items inside the home, damage to exterior fixtures, verifiable information she believed could only have come from someone with actual access to or knowledge of what happened inside that house. Kalela's indictment does not directly address those 2 notes. He is charged as an impersonator, not as someone with insider knowledge, but placed alongside former FBI agent Steve Moore's publicly stated assessment this week that the people sending ransom demands in this case have been acting in bad faith from the very beginning. The arrest does something critical to the broader ransom narrative. It confirms what the behavioral pattern of those communications always suggested. Moore's specific analysis stated publicly and on the record, they provided no proof of life at any point. They sent demands to media outlets rather than directly to the family through controlled private channels, a behavior that Moore described as inconsistent with a genuine ransom operation. They never followed through on any deadline. They never completed any transaction. Everything they did, according to Moore's publicly available analysis, was in bad faith. And bad faith communications have a function. They create noise. And noise does something very specific in an investigation. It pulls attention away from the signal, away from the physical evidence, away from the behavioral evidence, away from the forensic evidence, away from the 2 timestamps that have never moved and will never move. The ransom narrative was noise. Kalela's arrest confirms it. Moore's analysis confirms it. And now that the noise is beginning to clear, the signal underneath it is becoming visible in a way it has not been before. The signal is in the blood. This week, retired FBI profiler Jim Clemente appeared on NewsNation's Brian Enton Investigates and delivered a detailed forensic breakdown of the blood evidence found on the front stoop of Nancy Guthrie's home. His analysis changes how the final minutes inside that house need to be understood. According to Clemente's publicly available statements, the positioning and structure of the blood drops on that stoop are not random. They reveal something highly specific about Nancy Guthrie's physical state at the exact moment the blood was produced. Nancy's face was very close to the ground, within a foot of the ground. This could be she was either on her knees, hunched over, or actually lying on the ground. He referenced the specific shape of the drops, what forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden previously described publicly as donut-shaped drops with pale centers. According to Baden's analysis, that specific shape is typical for blood that comes from the nose or mouth mixed with air. That means she's coughing up blood or dripping from the nose. Otherwise, there would be dripping from a cut from above. Now think about what that means. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, with significant physical limitations, dependent on daily cardiac medication she could not safely miss, was face down or hunched over on her own front stoop, coughing blood. Not inside the house. Not in a struggle that overturned furniture or broke objects or left the kind of chaos that violence produces. On the porch. At the threshold. At the exit point. The interior of that house was immaculate. Law enforcement sources confirmed that to Brian Enton. No overturned furniture. No broken objects. No signs of a physical confrontation anywhere inside those walls. Whatever happened that produced that blood happened at the threshold, at the moment she was being moved out of the house. Not inside it. That sequence, an immaculate interior and blood only at the exit point, tells a very specific story about how the operation was planned. The plan was to move her from inside the house to outside without producing chaos. Without producing noise. Without producing the kind of physical evidence that a struggle inside a home leaves behind. The plan was controlled entry, controlled movement, controlled exit. What the blood on the stoop shows is that the plan did not stay controlled all the way through. Something happened at the threshold. Nancy Guthrie, mentally sharp, aware of exactly what was happening, ended up face down within a foot of the ground at the exit point of her own home. Coughing blood. That was not part of the plan. That was the plan encountering the reality of an 84-year-old woman who was present and aware and did not go quietly. And then Clemente delivered a conclusion that directly contradicts one of the most persistent theories in the public conversation about this case. He believes there was only one suspect. If there were 2 people, you would think one of them would have control of her, complete control of her inside the house, and brought her outside and would not have lost that control. But here, she's clearly on the ground coughing this blood up. There's no evidence to me that there are more than one offender here. One person. One suspect. according to a retired FBI profiler with a career built on exactly this kind of physical evidence analysis. That conclusion, placed alongside the physical description already in the public record: male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, average build, black mustache, according to Jennifer Coffindaffer's publicly available analysis significantly younger than 50, is the most specific the suspect profile has ever been in 83 days of this investigation. The institutional failure. This is the development that received the least public attention this week. And it may be the most important for understanding why this investigation has moved the way it has. A Pima County official, Dr. Hines, made a public statement that goes directly to the question every person following this case has been asking since April. Why did a critical hair sample spend 11 weeks in a private Florida laboratory while the FBI laboratory at Quantico, the most capable forensic DNA analysis facility in the federal government, waited? According to publicly available reporting, Dr. Hines stated publicly that Sheriff Chris Nanos held a personal grudge against the FBI dating back to 2015. In 2015, according to his statement, Nanos was nearly indicted on RICO charges. The charges were not ultimately pursued, but the relationship between Nanos and the Bureau was damaged. And that damaged relationship, according to Dr. Hines, a named senior Pima County official speaking on the record, may have jeopardized elements of the Nancy Guthrie investigation. When asked directly whether Nanos' grudge against the FBI could have jeopardized elements of the investigation, Dr. Hines said it was very possible. Now place that statement alongside everything that Jennifer Coffindaffer said publicly about the 11-week delay. She spent nearly 3 decades inside the FBI. She said publicly that the timeline of how that DNA evidence was handled was not tracking at all. That the Guthrie family should be upset. That the delay was inconsistent with how a case of this priority should be managed. And now a named senior Pima County official is publicly providing what may be the explanation for that inconsistency. Not a processing backlog. Not a routine delay. A personal grudge between the sheriff leading the ground investigation and the federal agency best equipped to advance the most critical forensic evidence in the case. That is not speculation. That is a named official on the record, making a specific claim about a specific institutional relationship that appears to have directly affected the handling of evidence in a federal kidnapping investigation involving an 84-year-old woman. The FBI requested that material over 2 months ago. The sheriff's office sent it to a private Florida contractor instead. 11 weeks passed. The sample is now at Quantico, weeks later than it should have arrived. Those are 11 weeks this investigation cannot recover. 11 weeks that belong to a grudge. 11 weeks that belong to an institutional failure that a named Pima County official is now publicly calling out. And then there is the laboratory. According to C.C. Moore's publicly available analysis, the hair sample is now likely at the San Francisco Forensics Laboratory that helped convict Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann earlier this year. That specific detail matters enormously. The Heuermann case had been cold for decades. 8 murders. No arrest. No conviction. What broke it open was DNA extracted from rootless hair, the same type of evidence present in the Nancy Guthrie case. The same San Francisco laboratory processed that evidence. And what it produced contributed to a guilty plea that put Rex Heuermann away for the rest of his life. Rootless hair. That is the specific forensic challenge. This laboratory has already proven it can solve at the highest level. C.C. Moore, the chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, a woman who has personally contributed to solving over 300 cold cases and who has herself solved 6 cases using rootless hair DNA alone, said this week, publicly and on the record, hair absolutely can make the case solvable. So I'm really excited. She addressed the timeline directly. Because this is not a cold case. Because Nancy Guthrie disappeared 83 days ago and the investigation is active. Moore said the laboratory will push this to the top of the priority list. Results that would normally take months may come significantly faster. And then she said something that deserves to be heard clearly. Not paraphrased. Not summarized. If they really do have a rootless hair and it is from that kidnapper, then this is going to be the piece of information that will solve the case. Not help the case. Not advance the case. Solve it. C.C. Moore does not use that word casually. She has spent her career inside the genetic genealogy discipline. She has seen what rootless hair can and cannot do. She knows the difference between evidence that narrows a case and evidence that closes it. And she is publicly saying that if that hair sample belongs to the suspect, not to Nancy, not to a family member, but to the person who was on that porch at 1:47 a.m., then the science exists right now to convert it into a name. Here is how that process works. The laboratory extracts a DNA profile from the rootless hair shaft using mitochondrial DNA analysis, a technique that does not require the hair root and that the FBI laboratory at Quantico is specifically equipped to perform. That profile enters genealogy databases, Platforms like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, where people have voluntarily uploaded their own DNA and consented to law enforcement access. The system searches for partial matches. A distant cousin. A second cousin twice removed. Someone who shares even a small percentage of their DNA with the unknown contributor. That partial match, however distant, is enough to begin building a family tree. The tree narrows. Names emerge. Those names get cross-referenced against the physical description from the doorbell footage. Male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, average build, black mustache, according to Coffindaffer's publicly available analysis significantly younger than 50, against the cell tower data from the night of February 1st, against whatever the FBI's digital analysis established about January 11th. The date both law enforcement and the Guthrie family flagged publicly without ever explaining why. Any single one of those tracks converging on the same name is enough to produce a prosecution-grade identification. Now step back from the 4 individual developments and look at what they show together. The ransom narrative is collapsing. Kalela's arrest confirms it. Moore's bad faith analysis confirms it. For 83 days, the dominant public framework, Nancy was kidnapped for money, the Bitcoin demands were the story, the deadlines and the cryptocurrency mechanics were the story, served a function that had nothing to do with the actual investigation. It was noise. It pulled attention away from the physical evidence, away from the behavioral evidence, away from the 2 timestamps that have never moved. The blood on that stoop tells a different story. 1 suspect, not 2. A controlled operation that encountered the reality of a mentally sharp 84-year-old woman who did not cooperate with the plan the way the plan required. Blood at the exit point, not inside. An immaculate interior that reflects preparation, not chaos. And a specific physical profile at the threshold that Clementi's forensic analysis has now placed on the public record. The institutional failure is documented. 11 weeks. A personal grudge. A named official saying publicly that it is very possible the grudge jeopardized elements of this investigation. Coffindaffer saying the timeline was not tracking at all. The Guthrie family sitting for 11 weeks while the evidence that could solve this case sat in the wrong laboratory because of a relationship damaged in 2015. And the laboratory now has what it needs. The San Francisco facility that solved Rex Hoyerman's case with rootless hair. C.C. Moore publicly excited. The technology that exists right now capable of converting a hair shaft into a name. The suspect was there before February 1st. That is not speculation. That is the conclusion that follows from everything the physical and behavioral evidence has been showing since the beginning. According to publicly available reporting, the FBI's own digital analysis established that something occurred at Nancy's address on January 11th, 3 weeks before she disappeared. Investigators asked neighbors specifically for footage from that date between 9 p.m. and midnight. Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly that the FBI's analysis had established something occurred on that date. He refused to say what. According to Fox News Digital, reporting through 2 sources with knowledge of the investigation, the doorbell images released by the FBI may not all be from the same night. One image reportedly shows the masked figure without the backpack, without the holstered firearm, in different attire from the February 1st footage. ABC News independently reported through unnamed law enforcement sources that the suspect may have visited Nancy's home on at least 1 prior occasion. 2 separate news organizations. 2 separate source networks. Both pointing toward the same conclusion. The person on that porch on February 1st had been there before. Which means the presence Brian Anton identified. The behavioral signature of someone conducting reconnaissance, cataloging camera positions, mapping access points, tracking the exact window when that house would be silent, was not theoretical. It was documented. In footage. In digital analysis. In the witness accounts of neighbors who registered something wrong in the weeks before February 1st but could not articulate what it was, because the figure moving through that neighborhood was not aggressive, not obvious, not dramatic. Just present in a way that did not fit the local rhythm. A vehicle observed multiple times in a location where it had no logical reason to be. A figure that triggered the kind of low-level unease that the human nervous system registers before the conscious mind can form a thought. Those witnesses have been struggling to come forward. Not because they have nothing to say. Because the suspect remains free. Because pointing a finger at someone who has not been arrested carries a cost that most people are not willing to pay. Because the institutional dysfunction, the 11-week delay, the sheriff's grudge, the routing of evidence away from the laboratory best equipped to analyze it, created an environment where the investigation moved slower than it should have and the community felt that slowness in the form of sustained uncertainty. That environment is changing. The right laboratory has the evidence. The institutional accountability questions are on the public record. The blood spatter analysis has publicly narrowed the Suspect profile to one person with a specific physical signature at a specific location at a specific moment. And the ransom narrative that kept the public looking in the wrong direction for 83 days is now publicly and officially collapsing. No plan is foolproof. Every structure has a weakness. Every operation, however carefully prepared, however meticulously rehearsed, however many reconnaissance visits were conducted before February 1st, encounters the friction of reality when it moves from planning into execution. Something always goes slightly sideways. A minor deviation from the rehearsed sequence. A moment where the plan and the physical world fail to align. The blood on that front stoop is one of those moments. Nancy Guthrie ended up face down at her own threshold, within a foot of the ground, coughing blood, in a way the operational plan did not fully account for. The level of resistance that an 84-year-old woman who was mentally sharp and aware of exactly what was happening offered at that threshold exceeded what the plan anticipated. And the blood that resulted is now a documented forensic data point analyzed publicly by a retired FBI profiler. The hair sample is another. Left in a location the suspect did not expect would matter. Or left in a moment where the operational discipline that had governed every other phase of the preparation momentarily slipped. Now sitting in the laboratory that solved Rex Hoyerman's case. Being processed by analysts who have already proven they can convert a rootless hair shaft into a name. And somewhere in the cell tower logs from the weeks before February 1st, in the digital record of a device that was present in that neighborhood when it should not have been, is the third trace. The one the FBI's CAS team has been building a movement reconstruction model around. Not just for the night of February 1st. For the days and weeks leading up to it. Because preparation creates repetition. And repetition creates patterns. And patterns are what bring prosecutions. Her medication was on the counter. Her hearing aids were on the nightstand. Her phone was on the nightstand. Her car was in the garage. Everything that belonged to her life was exactly where she left it. She has not been seen since a Bluetooth signal dropped at 2:28 in the morning. Day 83. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She raised 3 children alone after losing her husband at 46. She built a life in Tucson for over 5 decades. She brought live music to a hospital. She was a 30-year churchgoer whose single-missed Sunday service triggered everything that followed. She was sharp. She was present. She was aware of exactly what was happening when someone removed her from the home she had lived in for decades. She deserves an answer. Not a partial answer. Not a case that closes quietly with questions still open. A full answer. The kind that requires a name in a courtroom. And the evidence, the blood on that stoop, the hair sample in that laboratory, the digital record of a presence that was there before February 1st, the 2 timestamps that have never moved, is moving toward that answer. The ransom narrative is collapsing. The laboratory has the evidence. The suspect profile is narrower than it has ever been. And the person who planned this operation, one person, younger than 50, who studied that house for weeks before February 1st and left traces in the blood and in the hair and in the digital record, is running out of the time that the noise bought them. Records do not vanish. Evidence does not expire. And the weakness in this plan is already in the record. Already in the laboratory. Already being processed by people who know exactly how to find it. If you have any information, anything at all, no matter how small it seems, contact 1-800-CALL-FBI. tips.fbi.gov. Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. The combined reward is $1.2 million. Completely anonymous. You do not need the full picture. Investigators build the picture. You only need to provide the piece you have. Drop a comment. After everything this week produced, the Colella trial date, Jim Clementi's one suspect conclusion, the sheriff's grudge, CeCe Moore publicly saying this hair can solve the case, which single development do you believe brings this investigation closest to a name? Tell us. We read every single one. And stay close, because the moment that San Francisco laboratory produces a result on that hair sample, this channel will be the first to break down exactly what it means, where it points, and what it does to every piece of evidence this investigation has been quietly building for 83 days. We will see you in the next one.